if you want. We are recording, so we'll use that. We'll send this out in our email newsletter next week. So if you're uncomfortable with that or don't want to be on the screen, that's obviously fine. People are less concerned about that than they used to be. So the topic is coming into the mainstream in a really beautiful way. So there are our mailing list does grow each week. So I want to do a brief introduction of myself. I don't want this isn't about me at all, but a brief introduction. I'm Hunt Priest. I live in Savannah, Georgia. I'm a priest in the Episcopal Church. I don't always wear a collar to these, but I felt like the topic really did sort of get the Christian symbols out, and this is one of them. So just to kind of ground our conversation today and our presentation in the Christian tradition, I was in a Johns Hopkins study in 2016. We hope that results of that are coming out very, very soon. I've been saying that for a long time, but I'm feeling like it is. The topic is hot right now. There's a lot of that's going on. A lot of clergy writing. There's just a lot of conversation now around religion and psychedelics. I'm excited. That's what we're about. So I'm going to turn the microphone and the camera over to my friend Bryan McCarthy, who's one of the leaders of this research project around Christian imagery and Christian story and psychedelic experiences. Bryan's a professor of philosophy and been writing in this space for a while now too, and psychedelics and Christianity, is practicing Roman Catholic, and has become a really good friend and colleague. I'll turn it over to Bryan now. Thanks.
Thanks, Hon. I appreciate that. Our friendship is, so meaningful to me, and I really appreciate your friendship and everything we've done together, and all the stuff you've done for me. So, guys, I'm a researcher. I'm a philosopher, and I'm a researcher with the University of Pittsburgh. And I've done a number of different things. I had a piece that I published in the spring called Christianity and Psychedelic Medicine. And I'm working on a piece with Hunt right now that should be fun when it comes out. We'll let you know about that. You can see Hunt be his academic side, and and so now we're doing this study with the University of Pittsburgh. It's kind of a hybrid of a philosophical and a theological piece, but also a psychological piece. And it's specifically it's a survey-based study with people who have had psychedelic experiences that have Christian elements in it. And that could be that they talked to Jesus. It could be that they had, they saw a cross. It could be a Bible verse popped out for them. It could be even something very vague or seemingly vague, like my colleague here, who I'll introduce in a second, has made this point that, like, if somebody saw a giant and they kind of associate it with God because they feel like God is a giant to them or something along those lines, like, that would count, whatever, like, however they would interpret it as having some kind of Christian significance. And they don't have to be Christian or identify as one or anything like that in order to take the survey. It just has to have some kind of touch point in Christianity from their perspective. So really, it's wide open. We just want to hear from people and to be able to start thinking about, how the different psychedelic experiences can interface with this kind of theological paradigm that, that we've been talking about here. So this is Russ Phillips. He's a psychologist of religion, and he's done a lot of interesting things that I want to let him tell you about because he's ready to do that, and like he talks about it in a very interesting way. And then we've also got, not in the room with me, but also on this call, that's Dylan Denaro. Dylan, can you just say something real quick just so that they'll see your face?
Yes, hey everyone.
Okay, thank you. So I'll let him talk in a minute too. But he is the CEO of a company called Mind State Design Labs, and they do very exciting work. And I would let him tell you everything about it, except I just can't resist telling you at least one thing, which is that they are working on developing novel psychedelic compounds based on the idea that the different things that psychedelics do could be separated. So if you can have 3 or 4 different types of effects in a psychedelic experience, they want to be able to isolate those effects and mix and match them with from different kinds of drugs into new drugs. I think that's an accurate way of talking about it, but I'll let him fix it and clean it up if I did a bad job. But I just think it's really fantastic. And on the short end, one thing that they've done that's very interesting, even before they get to all that great work, is just a is just like an essay of all of the like what receptors things hits. It's surprising how little of that work has actually been done, and they've just done a bunch of it. So they're already doing really incredible stuff even before they get to the final drug development type stages. So both of these guys do really interesting work, and I'm really excited about working with both of them. They're both like great human beings, and they're both passionate about this project. So I'm going to let them tell you more about the work they've already done in their respective domains, and why they care about this project. And then, I'll say a little bit more about how we all got it together and what we're trying to do after, they kind of go. So Russ, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Bryan. And thanks, Hunt, for having us here. This is a really fascinating organization. I've signed up for the email list and been paying attention to that. My name is Russ Phillips. I'm Associate Professor of Psychology at one of the Pitt campuses, University of Pittsburgh at Greensburg, as is my colleague here, Bryan. And I was really excited to be a part of this. I'm new to everything with this field in terms of understanding the effects of psychedelics. I had always taught a psychoreligion class. It's one of my favorite classes. And I always taught Pankey's Good Friday study. I loved it. But I didn't realize how this wave was catching on again and how it's coming back in psycho. And Bryan said, Russ, you got to ride this wave with me, man. It's amazing. And I said, yeah, sure, Bryan. It's a big thing, I'm sure. But then I started seeing it in my psychoreligion publications, and my background's clinical psychology as well. And I was seeing, wow, there's all these psychedelics that are having effects on people's mental health in treatment-resistant depression and terminal illnesses. It's just Bryan's right. I gotta surf this wave too, especially for me. I've always been, I remember going to a spiritual director. I grew up Catholic, and I'll never forget, she's kind of analyzing my personality. It's really cool. And one of the things was this continuum from like the immanent, to the transcendent, and how you experience the divine. And for me, it was definitely far on the transcendent side, like the peak experiences of life. And I always wanted to study. That's why I got into psychology. That's why I thought psychology was. Little did I realize, oh no, it's a lot of other things. But the cool part was, like so many things are cyclical. Clinical psychology was coming back around to this kind of a duh idea that you've got to incorporate religion and spirituality into therapy. You have to. It's a part of people's lives. So it had been kind of absent a lot from the field, but I was kind of on the latest wave of that. So I was looking at how to do that, how to bring that into psychotherapy with people, religion and spirituality from the clinical end, as well as the research end. And I also did some research on how people integrate the sacred into their lives when they're coping with stress. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes there's challenges. So that was like the first 20 years of my professional life, but I always wanted to get back to those transcendent peak experiences. And so when Bryan mentioned this, after a few times of having to convince me, I finally realized it's rejuvenated my professional life, because I feel like I've finally gotten to what my calling is to look at some aspect of the transcendent. And in terms of my own personal experience, I've been on an SSNRI for over a decade, and for some physical reasons, but so I haven't been able to partake much in the psychedelic experience because of being on that drug for various physical issues. But those issues have gone away. I've always wanted to get off the drug, so I finally was able to get off the duloxetine and have my first psychedelic experience. I could interpret it with Christian elements. I have a hard time putting a label on my spirituality now. There's elements where I always say nature is my church. I belong to a men's psychological issues group from a Christian background. I also belong to a couple insight meditation groups. But when I think about the psychedelic experience, once I went off the duloxetine, it was really challenging, partly because I went off the duloxetine. As hard as I tried to make the set and the setting perfect, duloxetine, I don't care what they say, those SSNRIs do have withdrawal symptoms, and they are addictive because it was hard. But anyways, there were elements of the divine and the existential in there. Kind of, I think about Soren Kierkegaard's despair and sense of meaninglessness and just this groundlessness. but there are elements of nature in there and elements of forgiveness. And so Bryan was talking about, there could be some potentially vague or different ways to interpret psychedelic experiences. And I could certainly take that idea that I need to forgive this loved one, or that it would help me to forgive this loved one from a Christian perspective, So different types of ideas, theology, or ideas that could be interpreted as Christian, such as forgiveness, were in the psychedelic experience that I had. Unfortunately, I had to go back on the SSNRI. I'm hoping maybe, Dylan, you can find some psychedelics that I can still take while I'm back on my drug. But that's a little bit about my background. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm super excited to be doing this research. And I'm guessing we'll tell you more about that at some point here today.
For sure. Dylan, you want to?
Yes, thank you. So good to see you all. I'm Dylan DiNardo. As Bryan said, founder and CEO of Mind State Design Labs, psychedelic research company. And Bryan, you nailed it. So I don't even need to give the pitch at all. But the point of our research is that different psychedelics produce different kinds of effects, different kinds of phenomenology. If you compare LSD to, say, DMT or 5-MeO DMT or ibogaine, there are these differences, and science just does not understand where these differences come from biologically. And so one of the threads from the research we do, and I think something that I bring that I can help Bryan and Russ out with here is this expertise on phenomenology. So we at Mind State Design Labs put a great deal of effort into extending the realm of what can be said, articulating the ineffable in different ways, and organizing all these different categories of psychedelic experience. And so that data is necessary to then link the phenomenology, what happens to the mind and our subjective experience of reality, to link that down to the biology. So that's me from a professional angle. On the personal side, I was raised in a Christian context, kind of a fundamentalist Pentecostal context, and in my 20s, just I guess converted to atheism. Just couldn't stomach it anymore. But shortly thereafter, my atheism did not survive contact with psychedelics. So here I am as a Christian again. And I have a number of deep motivations for helping with this study. This is deeply important to me. And I think part of it is how psychedelics can help Christianity. I think probably many here share some version of the motivation of bringing back or democratizing access to these transcendent experiences within institutionalized Christianity, as well as in other ways. And so I think in order to do that, one thing that's absolutely necessary is to give Christians the language to be able to describe these experiences. In psychedelics history, of course, there was this deep alliance between, I think, Eastern religion and the psychedelic culture. So all of these things, the ego loss, all these terms that people use commonly to describe psychedelic experience, it's very much outside of the Christian tradition. But what I notice is that as a Christian going into a psychedelic experience, the language that I reach for comes from my tradition. I don't talk about nirvana. I talk about something that's much more Christian based. And so I think if that language is given to Christians, all of a sudden psychedelics become much less scary. And I think that when Christians do make the decision to engage with psychedelics, giving people the ability to articulate their experiences is such a major piece of engagement with psychedelics and healing and so forth. So that's part of my motivation here to be able to bring psychedelics to Christianity. But I think the reverse is just as important to me here. So the question of what can what can Christianity offer to psychedelics? So again, much of the language used in psychedelics is very Eastern, it's very new agey, and there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that, I would say. But when you bring your own personal smorgasbord of religious beliefs to psychedelic experience or to religion in general, there's a way in which the whole enterprise can't be cumulative, right? You don't have that historical structure of theology, of the institution, of thousands of years of the thinkers and the thousands of years of spiritual experience. And so I think there are many ways in which the current ability of the general psychedelic community to articulate the psychedelic experience falls very short. And I think there are many ways in which Christianity can bring that language so that even people who are not Christians, people who have no interest in Christianity, I think may be able to articulate and engage with their experiences much better if we give them that whole architecture of theology that Christianity has to offer. So the what Christianity can bring to the psychedelic world is deeply important to me. And one thing that we often engage with at Mind State Design Labs is the need to improve the phenomenological measurement instruments. So if you're familiar with psychedelic research, you may have heard of the MEQ30, the 11D-ASC, some of these instruments that are used to measure different psychedelic experiences. And one thing that we're doing at Mind State Design Labs is developing measurement instruments that are much broader and also much more precise. And I think in that endeavor, excluding religion would be quite a big mistake, as again, all of the infrastructure, all of the language from institutional Christianity, I think has a great deal to offer there. So I'm interested in this, and this is profoundly important to me on multiple fronts. So really glad to be working with Bryan and Russ here on the project.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Dylan. I wanted to say a little bit about just kind of how we got this ragtag bunch of guys together here. And also, I want to take a minute to highlight our students a little bit. But basically what happened is that, Russ has been reading my work for a long time, or not Russ, I'm sorry, Dylan has been reading they both read my work, but Dylan's really been reading it for a very long time and giving me comments and telling me where I can, tighten things up a little bit with different aspects of it. And I said to him, I said, next time, instead of like just reading the work and telling me how to make it better, we should actually just do it together. And I was surprised to hear him say that he was open to that. So we started talking about what the project would be. And I said, there's a kind of, there are all these experiences that, he and I have talked about, and lots of Christians talk about, like the burning bush and things that are in the scriptures and in mystical literature, Christian mystical literature, that, really sound very psychedelic. Not to say that it's the same type of experience or that it was occasioned by those, I don't really know, but certainly has some overlap and resonance with it. And so we thought, what if we look, because there does seem to be kind of a dearth of good descriptions about the various kinds of psychedelic experiences that we can have. We know we have good trips. We know we have bad trips. Some people don't like calling them bad trips, and so they'll call them challenging experiences, and that's fine with me. But that's not terribly precise. There's a lot of things that happen in a so-called challenging experience. And I said to him, well, in some of this mystical literature and in some of these scriptural, pericopes, there are these, moments like Jacob wrestling with God, and, there's Jacob's ladder, and there's the burning bush, and there's, Daniel talking to, I think, an angel, and the angel tells him that, sorry, he's late because he was fighting with some kind of principality or something. And I was just like, these are all very different, and a few of them would be quite challenging. And the people that seem to be having the experiences seem to be challenged by them. Like Moses is pretty freaked out, and Jacob is wrestling. And I was like, maybe there's something here about where we could draw on Judeo-Christian tradition as a way of talking about what's happening in various kinds of experiences. And so we started to think about that, and we were doing research and looking around, Dylan and I. This is before Russ came on, and you're about to find out how he entered the picture in a second. But, you know, we were looking at a bunch of different, like, where people had sort of categorized, you know, alternative states of consciousness in the literature already, and trying to look for models and figure out some way to like put all this together in our heads and on paper. And all of a sudden I just said, you know what, I think there's just not enough out there in terms of what Christians experience or what Christian sort of valences happen in psychedelic experiences. You know, we're just going to need to like start asking people and get some stories down on paper that come from actual people that are having these kinds of experiences. And then I said, I bet I know somebody who could help us with this. And then I went and I said, hey, Russ, like, I want to do this thing. Will you like help us do the psychological part of it and like get the survey right and make the International Review Board happy? Or is it institutional or international?
Institutional.
Institutional. Sorry. I'm not the psychologist on the team, clearly, but the IRB is what we always call it because that's what everybody calls it. And you know, they have a lot of rules for what makes a study like this ethical and safe and, you know, respectful and all kinds of stuff. So, you know, we needed to be able to, you know, I don't want to say jump through the hoops. There's a little bit of that, but also it's important. And, you know, he knew his way around that, and he understands, you know, how to compile data in a way that's responsible and makes sense and where we can actually use it and not screw it up. And, you know, he was interested in the subject enough. As he said, I kind of wrangled him into it a little. So, you know, I'm super happy he's around. And, you know, like I said, we meet with students, and like these students, you guys they're amazing. Like, like if you, you know, decide to take our survey, basically, and you go on, we give you an option to take either to write down a kind of trip report style, like almost like Arrowhead or, you know, something like that. Or we give you the option to just take the voice call and have one of our student researchers call you up and have a little voice call with you. And we've been training them, and they're really excited, and we're getting them to a place where they really know what they're doing. And they're so excited. They just can't wait to sit with people and listen to them, you know, listen to you guys talk about your experiences. So I'm really excited about them, and I hope you get to meet them kind of either through the interview process or, you know, at some point we may do something else, you know, kind of a public like this with them and bring them along to introduce them to you. But they're really great. So what we're trying to do here, and I think both of these guys captured really important elements of like the vision of this project, but the essential thing here is that we just want to know what people are experiencing so that we're not like making it up. You know, we think that Christianity, as you know, has some resources for making some sense out of psychedelic experience, and that helps Christians who might like to benefit from the healing that's available in these things that they're hearing about in the research, but are a little spooked as to how to make this like jibe with the Christianity that they practice, whatever kind of Christianity that is. And so it'll help those folks because it'll give some sort of Christian language to some of the things that happen to them. Or it could potentially, at least it could. The second thing that it helps is, well, basically everybody, because it allows us to start thinking, you sort of like leaning on the Christian mystical and biblical literature and on people's experiences to begin to sort of taxonomize or categorize or make sense out of the different types of good and bad experiences that can be had. And, you know, after we do that, we'll be using Christian categories and language for it, but it can easily be democratized and copied, or, you know, other people can look at this and say, well, we could do this with, you know, a more Vedic perspective as well. And that would be good work to do. And we could kind of lead the way a little bit in terms of showing how that might be done with other religious paradigms as well, or even indeed secular ones. And we might even do a little of that work ourselves in sort of democratizing, you know, the categories that we come up to be less Christian specific. So it both helps Christians and helps, you know, the broader understanding of what the phenomenology, as Dylan said, entails of a psychedelic experience. So lots of cool stuff here.
Yeah, if I could add to that,
Please.
I want to really emphasize the ethical component of this. As Bryan mentioned, you know, I have some background on IRB, and particularly with students, you know, being involved. I hand selected the students, was very careful who I picked, And I highly emphasize, I wanted to make sure they were very conscientious, reliable, ethical individuals. And the first couple weeks of the semester, we've been emphasizing the importance of confidentiality and privacy, and how some of these experiences they might be hearing are from people who did something that was perhaps illegal. In some cases, it might be in, a study that was legally allowed. But the point is that the students needed to keep this information confidential, and not go sharing this with others. And it's not just the students that we're focusing on in terms of trying to protect your privacy, but also the survey itself. Pitt system pays for really high quality survey software. We use Qualtrics. We also have cloud storage that requires multi-factor authentication. And so we're also in our protocol. We are planning on, those who want to do the voice option where they want to, speak with us. We are asking and encouraging folks to make up a name, so that we can call. It's good to have something to call you when we talk to you, and get that personal connection. But we don't want to use your name. And that data that we're collecting, what we're doing with it is we want to use your words. That's so important here. The phenomenology is dealing with saying, but we want to aggregate those with others, right? So we're not going to say, this person said when we go to publish this, per se. And if we do think your words are beautiful and that people want to hear that, what we will do is we'll change the demographic. So if you're really, say, like a 65-year-old male Episcopalian priest, we could change it to, a 25-year-old female, Catholic, something like that. So,
Or just leave the information out.
Or just leave the information out. Yeah. So I just want to emphasize the importance of ethics and privacy, and that's something we're paying attention to along the way.
Totally. Thanks for adding that, because you speak so well to that point, much better than I do, even though I wholeheartedly kind of feel exactly the same way about all of it, and like invited you on there partially to address exactly those kinds of issues.
So it has been approved by the IRB. Well, more so, the way to say it is it's been deemed exempt, meaning that there's no harm, that the types of things that we're doing don't have to go any further. We had multiple rounds. I met with some institutional review board folks, and so we have the stamp of approval to do our study.
Good. I do want to leave some time for there. I've had a couple questions about Q&A, so I want to leave some time for that. Certainly, we got about a half an hour left. Brian, maybe it's a little awkward, but I have a request for your article, and I have a link to it. Can I share that?
Yep, no problem.
Okay, I think it is behind a paywall, but there it is. It's not. It's on my iCloud, so it's not. That's not a paywall. So there. And some of Brian's other resources, and a couple other people that are on this call, are on our website. People, theologians, and others that are writing from an academic perspective. And Brian's done some work in more public, more kind of general public places too. America Magazine is one of the places, which is a Jesuit publication. So Brian's working in the academic space and with the general public. So yeah, so I didn't want to short circuit that. I just want to let people know that we are going to have some time for Q&A. I wonder if there's anything else about the process of the study or what people can expect once they log in. I'm going to share the link to that too in just a minute, and it's in our newsletter, but I'll share that to this group and encourage people to share it with other people, I think.
Yeah. So one thing that I just wanted to, it was like I told myself before I got on here, it's like, okay, one thing I got to make sure I can say before I get off this call. So we're already getting really good, people are telling their stories, and it's already coming back, and it's already looking good. We're really excited about it. We even had one of the students there the other day, last week, said, man, I thought I knew what psychedelics did, but I didn't know that they could do this. And I was like, yep, they can do this. And so we're getting some very inspiring stuff back already. But we want to have as much as we can possibly have. If you've had, a psychedelic experience with Christian elements in it, whether whether you identify as Christian or not, like that part of it's not important to us, other than for statistical information. But that shouldn't stop you at all if you think, well, I'm not really religious or I'm an atheist or something. That's not the issue. If you've got something that has some kind of touch point in Christianity or some kind of overlap with the way that you understand Christianity, it doesn't even have to be the way that we understand it. It's if you think it's got some kind of touchstone, then it does. And we just want to hear, I would be heartbroken if by the time we have to close the study, it's, there were still people out there who had these kinds of experience and wanted to tell them to us, but just, didn't get the survey or forgot or were busy or something. I know we're asking for your time, but, it's a great project and I really want you to be part of it if you want to be. And I will say that we've had some people who've come in already to take the survey, and then when they got to some of the longer questions, they kind of bailed, and I thought maybe they kind of ran out of time. If that's you, if you're on this call or if you're watching this video afterwards, if you've gone in and you thought, you had to leave for some reason, get out of the study, and you can go back in. We'll know what to do with that. It's more than fine for you to take it over again. And what happens is as soon as you get in there, we'll ask you some kind of demographic questions,
Would it help to share screen and show what this looks like?
Maybe. Let me just give them a rundown real quick, because I want to make sure we respect the times, because if they have questions, I want them to be able to ask them, and sometimes those kind of screen share processes take a little longer. But the first thing we'll do, so depending on time, so if we have some demographic questions, and this is stuff that IRB just likes us to ask, because they're really kind of just standard, basic, not very, threatening kinds of questions. They're just asking kind of basic information about who you are, so for statistical reasons only. And then we will start to ask you a few psychedelic kinds of questions, but they're real easy to answer. They're like, how many experiences have you had? Or, I mean, not that that's always an easy answer. Some people don't know, but not real involved. You have to think about them type questions. And then at that point, at the end of those kind of basic questions, then you will get a choice. Do you want to talk to one of our researchers? And it might be one of us, or Dylan, or it might be one of our students. Or do you want to write the sort of trip report style, like Airwood kind of thing? And if you take the voice call option, the part where you're in front of your computer, typing out stuff or answering questions, is probably 10 minutes or less. I think Russ even did probably 5 minutes. And so it's not going to take much of your time at all for the first part of it. The only thing that will take long is that if you've got a really interesting experience with a lot of things that you want to tell us about, then those longer questions where it says, tell us about the experience, will take some time. But if you want, you can do that in person with us asking you questions, and kind of have a fun conversation and vibe with one of our students or one of us. No matter how you do it, though, I would encourage and invite you to be as specific and detailed, even rambly if you want, as you want to be. We've trained our researchers to ask questions about the things they want to know about, and I've really emphasized upon them the importance of just letting you guys talk. And we want to hear it all, man. All the stuff that your friends and relatives are sick of hearing about, tell us. We just want to hear it. We want to understand your experience, and we want to tell other people about it in an anonymous way, so that we can all be inspired by the stuff that's coming in that's very inspiring.
Excellent. Was there anything before we open it up to Q&A, to some questions that you all want to add? And again, I'll put the link. I just put the link in. Annette asked about, is it open to people in the UK? And the answer was anywhere in the world. So yes. And one of the hopes from this is that this network starts sharing it out, because you all know people that aren't even on our mailing list or anything. So getting this out there widely is very important. Please
research. Share it with everyone you know.
Right. Yeah. Well, let me get a bigger view, and feel free to, if you have a question, jump in right now, and I'll try to keep an eye on the gallery. But yeah, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. It was very interesting. I was hearing IRB and Dylan. I took a quick look at your website while we were talking here, and I see that the pipeline shows it all going to IND enabling studies and all that. and I'm sure you're aware within the community, there's this whole debate between medicinal model and shamanic or religious type model. How does the work that you're doing here relate to any use, or let's say some people describe it as the religious benefit of well people?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say, first of all, there's a very very solid wall between any data and in the survey and then the company. So none of this data will be used by Mind State Design Labs. That's just my professional background. But I think that's it's a fantastic question and a central question to what's happening in psychedelics right now. And the limitations of the medical model are numerous. I'm going to do a panel at South by Southwest in March with Leonard Picard and Zach Leary and Neshe Devanot on very much this issue. And I think my motivation personally for pursuing the medical model is that I am anticipating that it is somewhat of a Trojan horse. That if we go through the traditional expensive FDA process, there's a level of safety that's there. There's a level of research funding that can go into the process, and hopefully there's a level of access that opens up when your Aunt Martha in the most rural part of America is telling her knitting club about her MDMA therapy or how her Vietnam vet husband did the MDMA therapy and now his PTSD is completely gone. There are these first these single connection points throughout all of the country that I think will open up access in general. And so I see the medical model as an enabler of generalized access. I anticipate and predict that ultimately the whole medical thing will only be a small fraction of what psychedelics are, but I think it's a great beachhead at the moment. And I think both sides of the equation have ways that they can help each other. Certainly downsides to the medical model. And I think one thing that's important about these kinds of studies is that as you advance the medical model, there's a danger of psychedelic experience all becoming defined in a very reductionistic way, where it's all medical, right? And so that's part of that's the danger. And so I think it's important to outside of the medical model to do studies like this to expand society's entire concept of what psychedelics are and what they do. And I think those applications outside of sick people and rather for the betterment of well people, I think that's ultimately what's most important here and what we can enable.
Yeah, just one last comment. I think that's all nice and good, but I think the FDA model is going to capture it rather than release it.
That is exactly the debate. Yes, you'll find many people who agree with you.
Thank you.
That might be a good segue. Katie had put a question in the queue in the chat, and Katie, I'm happy to turn the mic over to you if you want to ask that question.
Yeah, thank you. I'll read it, but it seems like today we're engaging ideas of entrepreneurship, capitalism, research, pharmaceuticals with religion, and then here today more specifically Christianity. And so we bring in, we bring in scripture and we connect all these pieces like money, research, drugs, and religion, all of which have a history of harm and without addressing the harm. And I'm wondering if we can even connect these things together. I know we have to, but should we be? I've spoken with Indigenous leaders who say they fear exactly what's happening right here, this combination of research, capitalism, religion, and psychedelics. And hearing their voices, is that something we should be considering here in this room, especially when many of those Indigenous leaders are the ones who've tended to these plants throughout the time that many dominant religions, including Christianity, have said that, psychedelics are harmful, it's the devil, it's, all this stuff. And they've tended to these plants all the while as we've questioned. And so, I know I'm kind of asking a pointed question here, and I'm doing it with humility. I'm appreciative for this group. I'm appreciative for this conversation. How is it that this study is going to find its way without addressing that mess? Or will it address that mess that is in the wake of Christianity? And through the science and through the academics and the harm that academic research has done and pharmaceutical research has done to these plants and to society, to find spirit and be in connection with spirit, which I think is what I know I'm here for. So anyway, I'll stop there.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's a fantastic question and a hard one. And hard questions are welcome, as are pointed ones. Right now, we don't even know what we're going to get yet. Like we've got a little bit like coming in already that's really exciting, but because we have opened this up so much to people who aren't Christian, we're getting a lot of people who identify in lots of different kinds of ways. And what I think interests me is just like, how do things show up for people? So for example, if scripture never shows up for anybody, then, we're not going to talk about it. I'm mostly just trying to understand what people have been through in their experiences. And so what we end up saying in this study will be pretty heavily a matter of what comes in. We have intuitions, we have a hypothesis, so it's not as if we have no way of thinking about this or something, or that we're completely neutral or something. We have a hypothesis, but if the hypothesis is not borne out, then it's not borne out. And so I'm not actually sure what's going to end up coming of it or what we're going to have to say, but I do think that I don't personally have an interest in, or like an investment in, propping up like the harm that's already been done. I agree with you that it has, and I don't want to cause more of it. And so anything that, and I, when I publish stuff, I let lots of people read it first, and so, if, I'll be, and we're a team, it's not just me, but for my part of it, I'll definitely be insisting that, that we're letting people look at what we're doing and seeing what they have to say about it. And, where these kinds of points become relevant connection points to what does come in the study, we're going to be interested in consulting the people that it's relevant to and asking them. But I think if people are having Christian things or things that they think of as Christian happening in those experiences, I just want to make sure those stories get told, and to start to think about what they mean from the point of view of the patterns that show up in the different things. So I think that's where I'm at about it. And Russ, I think you wanted to say something as well, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, Katie, thank you. I think this is a really important question. And I was, if you might be so kind to, if you're willing to provide your email, I'd love to talk to you more about this. There's two things that come to mind. The first is how Brian presented this and how Dylan, we met and we talked about this. This is something that comes from the heart that, I got to say, Dylan lives in a church. I just got to say, it's amazing. He lives in the town that I grew up in, and it's just such a cool place. It was a spiritual experience going to his place, but this is from the heart. Like we want, it's like a map. We want to, the way Dylan kind of described it, and Brian, and I see it is, there are people that have had some challenging experiences, right, with psychedelics, and I'm not quite sure all the things you meant, Katie, by harm. I think it's a lot broader than this, but we want to create a map for people, whether it was a challenging or difficult experience, or whether it was a beautiful experience. But as Dylan was saying, there's not always a Christian language. There's not much of a Christian language right now around the psychedelic experience, and so all of us have a Christian background here, and so we want to find a place to help people, or if people want to help us, to kind of share their experiences so we can kind of understand, you're not alone in this experience, right? And this is a resource for us. This is how we can make sense of it. This is how it fits within the Christian framework. Or if it's a challenging experience, how can we work through this? You're not alone. This is something that can relate to, this biblical experience, this Christian mentor that we have, and to work with each other on this. So I think that's one piece with this. Our initial goal is really from the heart. I don't see this as, like this capitalist thing that somebody's trying to do in this group with this research. The other part is the experience of just the mock interviews that we've done. So we're training these students, and I tell you what, just kind of like trying to come up with their own experiences, reading something, or I've taken like a spiritual dream I've had, and part of my psychedelic experience sharing it with these students. It's some of the most powerful things that I've ever experienced in 20 years of education. And it is some of the best work personally and academically that I think that I've experienced with these students. They're learning a lot of things that go beyond just this project. Like, it relates to relating to people, the social skills, the clinical skills they need in my background in psychology, but just the human to human connection. There's something with the liberal arts piece here, just the well-being piece, that I feel more connected to these folks, and they feel more connected to me. I think there's something spiritual with this too, that we're experiencing. So it's just really kind of a heartfelt thing is kind of my first reaction to what you said. But I think it's really important, and I'd love to talk to you more about it.
Yeah, I think somebody said that like the mock interviews were almost like a spiritual experience in of themselves.
Yeah.
And these are mock interviews where we're kind of manufacturing the experience just to practice on each other. I can only hope and expect that, it's going to be even more so whenever whenever they're doing real interviews with real people that have had real psychedelic experiences. So, I mean, it's working with the students part, and the interview and the person-to-person connection part is it's out of this world.
Yeah, I want to add one thing, and this isn't really an answer, but just in response to Katie, this issue of the harm that has been done, especially to indigenous populations, and all of the harms that are embedded in the way our society works. One motivation for me here, when I talk to indigenous leaders, when I talk to Westerners who have spent long periods of time in training under these indigenous contexts, one thing that they are very very concerned about and very hopeful for is this idea of us as Western society building our own way of making sacred practice with these medicines. So in a way that isn't extractive of indigenous traditions, in a way that isn't co-opting indigenous traditions, but that comes from our culture. And so I see this as a way to take one of the central philosophies and religions of Western culture, taking that tradition of Christianity and building that ability to access the sacred, the ability to articulate some of the ineffable, and bringing this language to that problem. I'm hoping that it helps with that endeavor of building up this ability as modern Western society to make our own way of engaging with the medicine that isn't embedded in that extractive history. So I hope that helps.
Dylan, you also got another question there, and thank you for that. I loved what you said there. But you got a question about your personal journey. I just wanted to call your attention to it.
Do you want to pick one, Brian? Do you want to read that for everyone?
Yes, it says, Dylan, your brief testimony about your faith journey is fascinating, uplifting, and powerful. There are likely quite a few church pastors here on this call. Were you in conversation with a clergy person during your journey? What could church pastors do to enable and support our parishioners who are seeking liberation through entheogenic therapies? What was helpful or harmful to you with regard to pastoral care, and what ought supportive pastors be doing around these new and renewing frontiers in health and healing?
I would say at that time, I was, you could say I was an ex-evangelical. I was in the deconstruction process, those buzzwords that you hear a lot. And so I was very much outside of the scope of any kind of pastoral care, and the background that I came from was really on the edges of Christianity, and really a pretty dark situation. And so I think what happened to me, and what happens very, very frequently to young people in that same situation, is that they run into a psychedelic experience that is ontological shock. It fundamentally disrupts the primary axioms with which you look at the world. And so for me in particular, it was a high dose DMT experience where God just simply showed up, and I could spend hours trying to articulate the ineffable, but it got to a breaking point where I could not reconcile my fundamental axioms of say scientific materialism with what I had just encountered. And this is very common with DMT in particular. I believe the stat is in the naturalistic data, 72% of people who encounter DMT who are atheists are no longer atheists 5 minutes later. So what happens to many of those people is they go very much into a spiritual but not religious, or a new age, or a shamanic kind of tradition. And I'm not opposed to that necessarily. Everyone has their own path, right? But I think Christianity and pastors being outspoken about their acceptance of these kinds of experiences, and us as Christianity being able to articulate how we can help, how we can articulate what these mind-blowing experiences might be, and give people frameworks to engage with. I think when people meet that moments where they are absolutely convinced that there is something more, there's some spiritual element that transcends materialism, I think giving them a path to Christianity as one framework to express their faith is absolutely critical. And so I think we have to be out there and loud and talking about it, so that when people hit these experiences, they know that this is a potential pathway, that Christianity is a route.
Excellent. Wow. Katie, or this is to the whole group. As I talk about psychedelics and Christianity, in some ways I try to decenter psychedelics from the larger Christian experience. I try to center healing, and I try to center mystical experiences and spiritual growth and development, and making psychedelics one tool for that, for the people that feel some call to it. And I'm not interested in Christianity at all owning it or co-opting it. And I do think the Christian mystical contemplative tradition is a powerful and important resource for people making meaning of these experiences, for those that have that background. So, I didn't do this time, but I try to acknowledge when I've had these conversations that the damage the church Christianity has done to the people, and to the people who have held these traditions, and to the traditions themselves. And I've sensed an openness from indigenous leaders. I mean, there's a concern, because everybody should be concerned about the Christians in some ways, and what the kind of the power dynamic. But I've sensed an openness, like I think Dylan said, or somebody said, that there is an interest in getting this out there from many indigenous leaders, and some concern about how it gets used. And I think the church at its best can be a place where we lower the barriers, where we provide an open community, and we're not interested in conversion, we're interested in healing. I think that's the church at its best. And we've done that by building hospitals and training nurses and doctors. And I think in that tradition, I think bringing psychedelics into the discussion I think that's part of the mission of the church. And I'm aware of all the dangers of that too. And yeah, so just to say, I get it. And I'm going to email you separately, because I'd like to talk more about that as well.
Do you mind if I say something to that?
No, please do.
You know, it isn't about bringing up the harms of anybody's past. It isn't about recentering or resurfacing harm. more than it comes from an idea of restorative practice. You know, when we are, and there's a lot of restoration that needs to be done in the world, regardless, I think, of who we are. And it begins with, you know, an acknowledgement of what has happened. And it isn't about, you know, I know that there must be so many wonderful people, including myself, who are having these amazing experiences with psychedelics, like healing. But to hear that somebody else is being harmed while I'm healing, then I'm starting to think, well, whose healing is getting centered? You know, is it mine? Because I'm growing, but somebody else is saying they're being harmed. And so how do we move forward together with that? And I think that's really the inquiry. And it isn't necessarily to say that people are bad and that they're born bad. I don't believe that. It's just that conversations can start with, I'm sorry, you know, and it can be so wonderful and so connective and so healing. And so I think that's really where I'm coming from and really enjoying being part of this. So thank you.
Oh God, thank you. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thanks. What else? We got a few more minutes. If there's anybody else, any other, I'll put the link into the study one more time. But oh yeah, yes, John.
Hi. I was just curious if you guys thought I call it the miracle mushroom, but the psilocybin mushroom has anything to do with Christianity specifically, or I mean, I don't get the impression that you guys see it that way, but I would love to hear your thoughts.
Are you asking whether we see psilocybe convensis as a kind of force in the development or origins of Christianity? Is that the question?
Well, there's that book by John Allegro. Of course, it's like very difficult to understand, but and then there's like the frescoes painted back in the day. And for me personally, I just see a lot of the biology within how mushrooms give water to different plants and how they basically trade and do different things that are very beneficial to the whole ecosystem is very Christ-like.
Oh, I see what you mean.
But I would just like to hear your thoughts.
Well, you know, being a Catholic myself, you know, God has God's fingerprints on everything. So it's not what our study is about, but I'm not saying you're wrong.
Well, what do you think about the Eucharist tradition then?
Do you mean its development, or do you mean the?
Well, do you think it's that cracker?
Oh, you mean do I believe it's God?
I mean, do you see God more in the mushroom when you eat that, or when you eat the piece of bread that they made?
I've never, I've never gone to mass on mushrooms, but so I don't have experience with that. But I would say that you know, one of the more influential models of what's going on in that process in mass that was developed in the 20th century is that when we take the Eucharist, that you know, the body of Christ is present, and by that means at least partially the people, that the people come together and become the body of the Christ in the act of taking the Eucharist. And I think that that's something that doesn't get enough airplay. So you know, as an idea for what's happening there, and so I think it's an important thing that we do, you know. And that we should keep doing it. And I don't see it as an incompatible or as a replacement, or I don't think you have to choose between the Eucharist and the mushroom. And I don't think that that the Eucharist has to be conceptualized in terms of mushrooms. But I do think that, you know, the broader view of what's called sacramentality in the Catholic tradition, this God's fingerprints point that I've made, is that because God has dumped God's self into our reality, both in the incarnation of Jesus and in the creation of the world itself, that makes what happens in the Eucharist possible and what happens in the mushroom possible.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'm gonna take one more question. I know we said an hour, so feel free to drop if you need to. We'll take one more question from Paul, and then we'll allow a few minutes just to close up. But Paul, do you have a question or a comment?
Well, just a brief comment. The notion of ontological shock, that expression was just used a while ago. And yeah, that's very common. That's what happened to me during my first experiences many years ago. And it recalls a conversation I had with a theologian, a theology professor, who shared that when he would use the phrase Trinitarian in his class, a hand would go up, and they'd say, "What's Trinitarian?" And he made that comment in the context that his students, he felt, did not have a really well-developed spiritual anvil to pound on. And so it just occurs to me that when someone's had a psychedelic experience that they don't know what to do with, they're needing some kind of spiritual anvil to pound on. Just that thought.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Terry, I see your question. When we say Christianity, what do we mean? There are I say this a lot. There are multiple Christianities, and I mean, you could point to the creeds, but then there's non-creedal Christians, and then we're talking about the Eucharist, but what that means to different Christians, yeah, we've fractured ourselves so much that it's hard to even define what that means. And I wish I had a better answer. I mean,
I can say something about it if you want.
Sure.
So I'm going to give a couple of answers. One is a kind of metaphysical or ontological or theological answer, and that is that, what I mean when I say I'm a Christian is that, that I accept God's invitation to be a conversation partner with God, and that I want to help as many people as want that for themselves to have that for themselves. And I find it humbling that it's even possible to have any kind of role in that way, but it does happen sometimes, and I'm always thankful and humble about it. The other thing I will say is about what we on a call like this or what we in a study like this mean by that. And for both of those, I'll speak for Hunt here and let him clean up if I mess it up. But I believe that both Ligare and our study team have a very broad interpretation of that for these contexts. We may have private feelings about what we think, is in, the sine qua non of Christianity, but Ligare is a very, very big tent, and so is our language for this study about Christian experiences or experiences with Christian elements. We've been very deliberate about that. Like, if you think it's Christian, then it is. And something similar, I think, would be true of Ligare.
Yeah. And if you say you're a Christian, then I'm going to take your word for it.
Right.
I'm not going to ask. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I remember one time my bishop, early on, orthodoxy was just being thrown around so much. Orthodoxy, and I remember my bishop saying orthodoxy is a bigger tent than people really want to acknowledge. Especially if they're throwing that at you, then they're trying to narrow it. And I think there's been thank you, Bryan. That's exactly right. Well, let's from one of you, maybe final words or an invitation or something. I put the link in again, and I'll do it again just so people have access to it. But Bryan or any of you want to?
Dylan, do you have anything you want to say here?
Give us your words. They're very important. They're going to be fundamental to, I think, what psychedelics are and how people talk about it, and we're going to make that happen. But without the people expressing the words in Christian terms that give us the foundation for it, none of this happens. So I just underline what you can give us is very important. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Dylan.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks everyone. Okay, thank you all. And again, this will be available for you to share. And as you feel called to, please share the link and really encourage you to take the survey yourself and then share that with others in your circles. And when do you want to, when will this close out?
We're gonna watch it and see what we get.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, the thing is we have student researchers right now who can help us do the interviewing, and we won't have that in the summer, so we may keep it open in this, in the summer. But the sooner you do it, the easier it is for us to do what we need to do with it, because we just have more people working on it with us right now. So the sooner the better, but it'll be open for a little while.
If it helps to have a deadline, and some people are like that. I think that
Right.
eventually we're going to move past Ligare. We're focused on Ligare right now. So I'd say, by Easter, how does that sound?
Great.
That sounds good. That sounds good. Yeah. So I sent the link. I don't know how do people access the interview and not doing the online?
It's part of the survey. They just ask, like, if you're watching this or on the call and you want to do the voice call version that ends up meaning that you're answering the survey for 10 minutes or less, then there will be a point kind of after all of the demographic questions that IRB asks us to ask, and after all of the kind of easy psychedelic questions, like that don't take long, there will be a thing that says, do you want to do voice or do you want to do written? And then you just pick the voice. And even if you pick written, it would be really helpful to us if you gave us an email or a phone number, some way to get a hold of you, even if it doesn't have your name in it. We don't need that, but just a way to ask follow-up questions. No matter which way you take it, we would like to have that if you're willing to give it.
Yeah, good. Somebody's got there's some background noise coming from somebody's. It's hard for me to tell. Okay, it just went off. That's okay. Just went off.
And Jamie's on this call too, and she asked, like, do we have the link? Hunt, did you put that in there? The link
I
to
put it in. I think Jamie was asking about a blurb that she could share.
Oh, a blurb. Yeah, we have the script. Let me see if I can get it fast enough to just put it in the thing here. It was. I think I can. Give me like 30 seconds.
Okay.
Let's see here.
Thanks as we're closing up. Thanks to all of you that showed up for this and all the questions, and grateful for this community, this gathering, and the people that are willing to show up for an hour and put their input in and be part of this discussion and movement, actually.
Okay, here we are.
And Tim King, that works with me, put in a link to another event we're doing next week about experiences that Christians are having that are not necessarily identifiable as Christian. So we're looking at it from both sides.
Both sides of the coin.
Yeah, both sides of the coin. Tim just put that back in there.
Okay, here's Jamie and anybody else who's still here and wanted this. This is the official script that we got approved with the IRB. This is like our blurb about like taking the survey. Yeah. And I think Hunt has also written something in the last couple of Ligare emails. It's another kind of blurb as well. Yeah,
that's good. So this will be good.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor.
Yeah, thank you, Three, and thanks to everybody that came on. And we'll just keep it going. Thank you all. Take care.